Let's take a breath. And exhale. Let's do it.
Right now, we are in a mental health crisis in this nation. And so we have a need now that has outgrown our ability for people to access mental health services.
Our shortcomings are criminalized.
When a Black person does something wrong on a national scale or in media, there is a narrative that we are either a victim or an aggressor. The narrative is never that they had a mental illness or that they needed help.
I shouldn't have to stress about running into a police officer.
There's a lot of research that indicates that the trauma that a child has experienced impacts their learning.
Trauma to us is very normalized.
2 weeks after we were shut down for COVID, George Floyd got murdered. We literally saw a Black man being murdered on TV, nationwide, global. As shocking as it was, for Black people, it's always been a part of our reality.
We're talking about a long history, an ancestral history through our DNA.
How can someone get away from a history that hasn't been addressed or fully discussed or acknowledged? Intergenerational means it happened before we were even born. Generations before us, and before us, and before us have experienced oppression, intentional under-resourcing, and separation for many, many years.
The Africans were brought over and part of slavery. That whole process of breaking down family unit, breaking down the psychological confidence of who we are as individuals and as a unit and a continent, that began the process of self-hate.
It is a part of telling the story of intergenerational trauma. I have a graduate degree, and most of what I learned about slavery occurred when I read this fictional book and went to Ghana.
I do not refer to what happened 400 years ago or nearly 500 years ago. Hatred. This is a massacre, genocide, manipulation, exploitation of African people. I do call what happened the transatlantic slave massacre. The transatlantic slave massacre, genocide, exploitation, and manipulation of our ancestors.
The slave castle at the Cape Coast was quite a transformative experience for us.
He said today he wants to show you the African culture, and he's very privileged to welcome you back and to teach you some of the ways of African people.
There was a part of the tour where he took us down to the rooms where when a slave misbehaved, they don't kill them because that doesn't scare the rest of the slaves enough. So what they did is they took the strongest, most aggressive or resistant to being locked up, and they locked him in that room that had no light, no air, and then just left him. At that slave castle, we chose to restory our own version of what that slave castle is. I am a Black American who came back, and I completed a healing ceremony in which we honored the strength of our ancestors, the strength of our blood, the strength of us to be able to survive despite and still be able to come back to this space where we are no longer slaves. We are free. We are free in our minds and we are free in our bodies. It's really difficult to heal from something if you are unable to acknowledge it or bring the awareness of all the details of it, the horrific, the gory, and just say, yes, that happened. Now we move forward as a community. The purpose of this documentary series is to talk about it and provide space for it. Why should we not talk about the truth of the impact? As long as that does not happen for the Black community, we will stay in a state of intergenerational trauma.
People need mental health services. They do. They always have. That is, but we've always had outlets in terms of coping.
In order for us to be able to effect change, we need to develop a collective consciousness around the impacts of racism on all of us.
Part of my commitment to myself and to the profession is to change the face of social work. And that means we have to have more representation of social workers who look like the communities that they will be serving. So that means more BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are in the profession.
There's been a lot of trauma, as we know, and so we're constantly trying to break out these constructs that we've learned and been conditioned to abide by. And part of that is seeing who we are on the inside and understanding that we're great people. We're here to create. We have these problems in our community. We're creators. We can create solutions for ourselves. As equity continues to be a space for us and a platform for us, we will get there. And so I want us to also remember, what does that look like when we're there, so that we can stop saying, this is not happening, this is not happening. Because in my space, this is happening. Right. It's been happening, and it's happening more and more. And so we have to also identify that and make that our narrative as well.
And we need to make change by not being passive, not letting things just blow over, because especially in this day and age, people have a habit of paying attention to something for a short amount of time, like a week, and then move on to something else, because there's so many distractions, there's so many things to look at. And that I feel like I would try to change that. Like if you're pressing for something and it doesn't change, you need to keep pressing until it changes.